Welcome to the College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line. Here are your co-hosts, Doug Lesmerises and Shehan Jeharaja. And we're back on the College Football Survivor Show. Doug Lesmerises with a different partner this week. Shehan is out. He'll be back soon, but I'll be joined by Tyler Shoemaker, who is somebody that I've been doing podcasts with on my Ohio State podcast, Buckeye Talk, all season. He is a guy who is really good on college football gambling. He has his own proprietary algorithm where he rates teams. And what Tyler and I are going to do is help you guys get ready for any bowl confidence pools that you're doing. We ran through about 10 or 12, maybe even 15 bowl games that we think you should have the most confidence in which team's going to win. Because you do the bowl pools, right, with your friends, with your family. Well, you can also do it with us. We set one up at the ESPN Bowl Mania. You're going to have to sign up for an ESPN account to do it, but it's free. It's called College Football Survivor Show with Doug and Shehan. It is a private group. You go there, you click on that, you join that group, and the password to get in is playoff, all lowercase, playoff, because it's a playoff show. You guys get that? So we wanted to do this. We wanted to have our College Football Survivor Show audience have a chance to interact. And guess what? The winner of this pool will get the opportunity, if he or she so chooses, to join Shehan and I on an off-season podcast. You can help pick the topic. You can come on with us. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, kind of with that playoff angle, and we'll do that. That's the prize. I know. You'd like cash. Everybody wants cash. Hey, what do you want for Christmas? What do you want for the holidays? I want to be on a podcast. Nobody asked for that. I get it. You want money. We can't give you money. We're going to give you the opportunity to join us, but also bragging rights. So we'll mention the people who are in the lead. Go in there, join us. College Football Bowl Mania on ESPN.com. You have to sign up with an ESPN account, but then you get in there. The password is playoff. We'd love to have you. And even if you don't want to sign up, even if you're not doing, you guys know what a confidence pool is, right? Where you pick all the bowl games, but you apply the most points to the game where you think, I'm sure who's going to win this. And then you apply the least points all the way down. I think it's 43 on the ESPN thing, 43-1, right? In order. I'm least confident about this. So that's only 1 point. And we're not picking against the spread. So it's straight up winners in this thing. But Tyler and I talked this through. And if you don't want to do that, it's a bowl preview. The first bowl game is Friday night. It's right around the corner. It's bowl season. There's some fun stuff to talk about. Tyler is really good at this if you've never heard him before. So we would invite you to join us here. The Apple Show this week, you guys know, we do 4 bonus episodes a month for an extra $2.99. So like 75 cents an episode. You get a bonus episode. This week I did the 9 best Heisman candidates in the 9 years of the college football playoff. Playing off Caleb Williams, just looking at everybody. It's not, maybe there's guys in there who did not win a Heisman, but should have if the competition hadn't been as strong. I kind of go through even like a top 15 of here's the guys I think were the best Heisman candidates. It's a different way to look at it based on how things went this year. So if you want to sign up and be an Apple Podcast subscriber for that bonus episode, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you in the bowl pool at ESPN.com. Their Bowl Mania, College Bowl Mania, College Football Survivor Show with Doug and Shehan. The password is playoff. And now here's me. Here's Tyler Shoemaker talking about the games that you should have the most confidence in this bowl season. So Tishu, what we're going to do here, we have 41 bowl games, and we're going to go through all of them in great depth. I think about 10 minutes per game. 10 times 41 is 410 minutes, and that's just shy of 7 hours if you have time for a 7-hour podcast. Is that cool?
If our listeners want to listen to us for 7 hours, let's do it. We'll just do a marathon. I'm down.
I definitely at some point in my life am going to do a 24-hour podcast just to see for life experience. And maybe I'll just listen to it myself. We're not going to do that. We're not going to go through all 41 bowl games. But what we are going to do is go through the bowl games that we think you should have the most confidence in picking in a bowl pool, right? In a confidence bowl pool where you put the highest number of points on the game you are really sure about the winner, and then the lowest number of points on, I have no idea who's going to win this game. We are not we're not saying what you would pick with the spread, Tishu. We're just saying who you think should win the game, but certainly what the spreads are at the moment in these games matter. When I just double checked this, there were 6 games that I had where the line was at least 10 points, where one of the teams was favored by 10 points or more. So I think games like that would potentially matter. I also went through and I tried to check EPA, which again is expected points added. It's a measure It's a measure of something, relative strength. It takes the strength of your opponent into account. It's offensive and defensive. There's an overall number. I went through the latest EPA numbers and found games where the gap in EPA between the two teams was at least 30 spots. There was a 30-spot difference between teams. There were 17. There were like a third of the games where the gap was that wide. So that might lead us somewhere. But what we really want to lean on is your expertise and your algorithm and your proprietary way of analyzing teams. But before we do that, how are we taking into account the fact that we don't know which teams care? Half the great players are all not playing. As we speak right now, a lot of them have already declared that they're opting out. There might be more guys, like, for instance, I don't think Bijan Robinson from Texas, the great running back, has officially declared that he is not playing in his bowl game, but there are reports that he is not playing in his bowl game. How do we do this, Tishu? How do you try to factor that into what is normally, when motivation is equal and everybody's playing unless they're hurt? How do you try to factor these kind of things into your bowl game equation?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Bowl season is becoming more and more difficult to try to project, from a confidence standpoint, from a betting standpoint. It is very difficult trying to keep up with all the transfers and opt-outs and who's declaring for the draft and that sort of thing. So during bowl season, I do rely a little more heavily on what the odds makers think. So I have my number that I project with my algorithm, but I also am looking at what the odds makers are doing with the line as these opt-outs and things come in, and kind of mixing that into my formula to try to get kind of an average of the two, if you will, just to get a sense of what the true number on the game should be.
Okay. So we're going to give you, we'll try to give you guys maybe like 10 or 12 games that you can really feel like, these are the ones that you should have pretty high up in your confidence pool. Is there a single game? Because there, for me, is sort of a single game that really jumps out to me when I think of motivation, opt-outs, and then maybe also generally just how those teams played this year. Is there a game that really leaps off the page for you?
The game that most jumps off the page to me, both in terms of what I saw with my eyeballs, how teams played down the stretch, and then, of course, using my formula, Florida State over Oklahoma is my number one confidence pick here. Both in terms of what my number on the game is, what the implied probability with the money line currently is, and Oklahoma just had a bad season that I think they probably want to put behind them and start looking ahead to 2023 and year two of Brent Venables.
And this is a team in Florida State that you started to like over the back half of the season, right? And again, you've talked a lot about your numbers when you start leaning on more recent games. Wasn't Florida State a team that was very high in your rankings, your ratings, when you did that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they're number one when I look at my recent power ratings, which filters out the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season to see how teams kind of played down the stretch. They're actually number one by about 4 points, which is huge. So Florida State towards the end of the season was playing as well as anyone in the country. So I definitely would look to pick them here in a confidence pool. I will be looking to bet them, and that's definitely a team that I'm very high on here ending the season.
Eric Gray, Oklahoma's leading rusher, is a guy who has opted out of this game. That certainly factors into this. And I do think you're generally, to me, Tishu, you're looking for teams that have a reason to want to play well in the bowl game. And in this Cheez-It Bowl, this game is on Thursday, December 29th, Oklahoma, Florida State in the Cheez-It Bowl. Florida State is trying to get somewhere. And I think Florida State would view this game as a springboard to not just next year, but at a time when there is some uncertainty around Clemson. I think they would view this as a springboard into the future. I think they would view this as a springboard into we're back. And Oklahoma is hanging on by their fingernails, and I think Brent Venables just kind of wants this season to be over. But I think by your ratings, in the second half of the year, this Florida State team was playing like a team that maybe is back, right? I mean, again, you already said that, but like this could be a program on the rise.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of put it in perspective from the numbers. I mean, I've got Oklahoma in that recent power rating, how they finished the season. They're 45th in the country compared to Florida State being at number 1. So I've talked before about how when I'm projecting a game, I use 3 different formulas, weighing more recent games and some and different factors. The average of those 3, which is how I'm looking at bowl season, I'm taking the average of those 3 formulas. My average projection on this game is Florida State by 16. So I think it's going to be a 2-score game. So I really like Florida State to win.
EPA, as I referenced, Florida State 6, Oklahoma 60. So that's a 54 spot difference between those two teams. Again, T-Shoe's numbers are the way to go here. This is a 7.5 point line. This is not one of the 6 games that is a double-digit spread at this point, but I like this one. This one, I think, jumps out for a variety of reasons. And as you always say, T-Shoe, your numbers tell you something. And then when there are intangible things that add to what your numbers are telling you, that sometimes is when you really like a pick.
Yep. Absolutely. And your point about Florida State wanting to finish strong here and springboard into 2023 and potentially contend for the ACC, I think is really important to keep in mind here. Whereas Oklahoma, I think, is just ready to be done with this season.
Okay. So mine is similar. I'm going to give you a game that this is a big line, but I am looking at this from an opt-out standpoint, and I'm also looking at it from a motivational standpoint. And that game is Oregon State, Florida. And this is a game where Anthony Richardson, the incredibly talented Florida quarterback, is not going to play in this game. And Oregon State is a program that believes it is on the rise. They just gave Jonathan Smith a new contract. He did probably as good of a job as any coach in college football this year. This is a 10.5 point line in this game. EPA, Oregon State's 32, Florida is 61. But I also you're not getting Florida. You're not getting the Florida that beat Utah to open the season. But when I look at it motivationally, T-Shoe, I'll be curious what your numbers say about Oregon State. But this game, it's the Las Vegas Bowl on Saturday, December 17th. So this is one of the early ones. And again, you put a lot of confidence on it. You can feel good or, hey, I got a big one early in the bowl season. How do you view this one? Is Oregon State a team that your numbers have liked this season?
Yeah, definitely. I've bet them a ton. I picked them on multiple shows to beat Oregon, and they did. And here in this game, my average projection here, I projected at 4 points. But this is one, like I said, because I like to lean on the odds makers, particularly in these type of games where you have key opt-outs, because it's very hard to quantify not only the impact of losing that particular player like an Anthony Richardson for Florida, but also how the team is going to handle that with their leader out. So when I factor in all of those things and come up with my confidence number, this is the 12th ranked game on my board as well.
Okay. So that's decently high. Not quite as high for me. This jumped out when I saw Oregon State wants to do something. Florida doesn't have its quarterback, but that's still pretty high for you. So we can feel good about that.
Yep.
There's another one. I'm gonna jump ahead of the line again because there's another one, and I like it when the thing that I think matches up with things that you have said before. So this makes me feel good about this. There's a matchup here where there's a team that has been in a little bit of free fall since its peak this season, and it is a team that I think you identified that free fall, and I think we saw it coming and we talked about it, and I think it's happened. And that's Syracuse going up against Minnesota. The EPA matchup in this game, Minnesota, for I don't know what reason, is 9th in the nation in EPA, and Syracuse is 85th. I'm not going to pretend to understand why Minnesota is 9th. At the moment, this is the Pinstripe Bowl, December 29th. At the moment, I have not read or seen an indication that Mo Ibrahim, the great running back from Minnesota, the All-American, I have not seen an indication that he will not play. So if he plays, I just think Syracuse had its moment, and it was 6 weeks ago, and it's gone. And I think Minnesota might roll here. This is a game where the line is 7.5. But what do you think about this Minnesota-Syracuse matchup?
Yep. I love it. Also of note, Tanner Morgan was kind of banged up there at the end of the season, but he's been practicing, and everything I've read says indicates that he is expected to play in this game as well. Yeah, so this game, Minnesota's the number 7 team on my board for confidence. I project this game around 10, and I won't be surprised if Minnesota absolutely rolls Syracuse here.
Okay, so I think there's two things happening here. Minnesota, good year, great running back, a guy that if he's going to play, they can send him out with 30 carries and let him run for 200 yards. And then another team that had a good year for Syracuse, but it's just kind of not happening for them the last month or so. All right. And I love, we're going to get into the weeds. We love to get into the weeds with you, T-Shoe, where we get into, oh man, there's a team I don't know whether it's one of your confidence picks or not. We're going to talk about Rice on this podcast, but we don't have to talk about it yet. Give me another game that you really like, that you have a lot of confidence in.
So my next game, number 2 on my board, is Marshall over UConn. I project this game at Marshall minus 13. The odds makers implied probability here is 75% for Marshall. So I think they finished the season really, really strong. I had their season win total over 7.5, and it came down to the very last game, but they came through for me after a bad loss to Bowling Green early in the season and beating Notre Dame. They were kind of all over the place early in the year, but they finished really strong. UConn did have a great season by UConn standards, but even so, even looking at how these teams finished, I've still got them roughly 50 spots apart in my recent power ratings. So, I mean, there's just too much of a talent disparity here. Marshall starting corner Stephon Gilmore is an NFL player. He's a stud on the outside for them. So I like the Thundering Herd here to beat UConn.
This is one of those huge EPA gap, right? Marshall is 27 and UConn is 67. So that's backing up the way that you view Marshall. I think this is a smart one. I figured you would be on this one. This one makes a lot of sense. Okay. There's another one that I'm going to dive in because I want to hear your take on this. There's a team that you liked that we suggested a bet on conference championship weekend. Was it conference championship weekend? It was late in the year and it didn't quite happen, but it was a competitive game. And I felt like you had good vibes about this team. And by vibes, I mean numbers. I get it. Good algorithms about these teams. It was Ohio. And Ohio, in its matchup with Wyoming, this bowl matchup by EPA, Ohio is 41 and Wyoming is 111. Now, the line on this game is only -1. This is December 30th, the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl. It's only a 1-point line, but that is a huge EPA gap, T-Shoe. I just wanted to get your view on Ohio, Wyoming, because I thought maybe knowing that Ohio was a team that you had an eye on previously, if you liked this one.
Yeah, I do. This is the 13th rated confidence game on my board, and I don't really understand why the line's only 1 because, I mean, I get that Rourke, the MAC Offensive Player of the Year for Ohio, the starting quarterback, is out. But he was also out and kind of in and out of the lineup late in the season. They did not look good against Toledo in the MAC championship. So like that's my only apprehension there. But that's also kind of like how everyone in the public is gonna view this. So I think a lot of people are gonna be down on Ohio. But when you look at their body of work, I project this game at 9.5. So I'm right there with you. I like Ohio pretty solidly here to beat Wyoming.
And again, you guys can note this. We're doing this from a bowl pool, confidence pool, or just even if it's not confidence, just making bowl picks straight up. But this is a spot where the line is -1 and T-Shoe, you're saying you have it at nearly 10.
Yep.
So this could also be, if you guys want to dance a little bit in bowl season, this could be a bet to keep your eye on because T-Shoe, again, that's a 8.5 to 9 point difference between where you would project this spread and where it is right now. And again, there might be a player absence that would lead into that, but you're saying you don't think that changes the game that much. And again, the idea that Ohio did not look good its last time out probably affected this line, but fundamentally, you believe that your numbers tell you that Ohio's just that much of a better team. Fundamentally, there might be value in a game like this, right?
Yep, certainly. And the crazy thing is, despite them playing very poorly especially offensively against a bad Toledo defense, the recent formula would project Ohio minus 15.5. So even accounting for their bad MAC championship performance, my numbers still like them to win by double digits here.
Okay. So I would note, everybody can circle that Ohio-Wyoming game. Again, it's a little bit under the radar, but this is the kind of stuff that we want to give you when we talk like this, because again, we're doing it for a bowl confidence pool, but Tishu also is a gambling guy. All right, Tishu, give us another one that you really like.
This game, there are a lot of transfers and opt-outs on both sides, but I'm going to take Oregon here as my third overall confidence pick against North Carolina. I projected at 11.5. Again, that's not including the transfers and opt-outs, but in my opinion, they kind of balance each other out, because you mentioned the defense is back for Oregon, the star receiver Downs for North Carolina is out, so I think the transfers and opt-outs are going to kind of come out to a wash. As far as I know, Drake May's playing in this game, Bo Nix is playing in this game, so the both quarterbacks are going to be there, and I think Oregon's just a way more talented team.
And Oregon was a team, again, not Oregon, excuse me, North Carolina was a team. And again, we're talking about teams that maybe peaked already and have been on their way down. That certainly would apply to North Carolina here. But fundamentally, there are just some issues with the North Carolina defense, and a brief Drake May Heisman campaign sort of like lifted North Carolina up. And again, in a situation where in like week 9 or 10, there were only about 10 or 12 teams that still had any chance to make the playoff, and they were still one of them, because at that point they were a one-loss team that had a path to being a one-loss Power 5 conference champ, and that we were in a world where like, well, that probably gets you in the playoff. So as long as that's still possible for anybody, North Carolina fit that bill. And then I think North Carolina, Tishu, I don't know if you would say, but like they just kind of came out and in the back couple last games of the regular season sort of like maybe showed us who they were the whole time along, which was a team with a good quarterback and also some pretty serious flaws. And now that's the team that they're sending into a bowl game off 3 consecutive losses to Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, and Clemson. So I don't know. These guys feel like they've been leaking a little bit for a month.
Yeah, and the numbers reflect that. The recent formula that I have would make Oregon a 16.5 point favorite here. So definitely an indication that these teams are kind of trending in opposite directions here.
As you know, if they both play, if Drake May and Bo Nix both play, this is going to be one of the best quarterback matchups of bowl season, because there's like a lot of quarterbacks, who aren't playing. So yep. Keep that in mind. This should be interesting for that reason. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's 6 games that we have given you guys so far for your bowl confidence picks. I think we'll give you another 6 or so at least, but we'll do that next after this.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.
Doug Lesmerises back with Tyler Shoemaker. Tishu, there are a couple of these other games that, by the way, that line as it stands is the biggest line of bowl season. It's almost a 2-touchdown game of Oregon and North Carolina. And I see it 13.5 at some places. I see it 14 at some places. That's the only game that I saw over 10.5. So this is, the odds makers are also reflecting that they think that Oregon-North Carolina game is a pretty obvious pick there. There's 2 other games in this area of double-digit favorites that I want to talk about, because it seems like it could make a lot of sense to me. And one is, I believe, the game that is going to kick off bowl season. Is that correct? Let me double check that. It's UAB versus Miami of Ohio, Friday night in the Bahamas Bowl. It's an 11-point line, 10.5 or 11 points by EPA, and UAB is favored. By EPA, UAB is 29th. Miami of Ohio is 102. Do you see a gigantic gap with your numbers in this game, Tishu?
Yeah, it's crazy. We're on the same page here. UAB is a number 4 game on my board. That would have been my next pick anyway. I project it right around 10. And again, the implied probability here from the odds makers is 77% win probability for UAB. So, and a big note here on this game is Blaine Gabbert, the starting quarterback for Miami of Ohio, is in the transfer portal, and he's a very good MAC quarterback. So he will not be playing in this game.
So that's even more reason. That's like an opt-out backing up what is
a numeric disparity between these two teams. So that could be nice, TCU. That's a little risky. Boom, right off the bat, first game of bowl season. You're putting big confidence on it. Maybe you're dropping your 41 on this game, but it feels like there's multiple reasons to lead you there. And I do think, TCU, sometimes it might be a good idea in a situation like this to hit early games hard with what you know so that a bunch of stuff can't change, right? So they can't be like, oh, well, I thought this, and now here we are. This game's still 13 days away, and there were 3 more opt-outs or an injury or something else happened, as opposed to, all right, I think this game's right around the corner. It's Friday night, and UAB is a big favorite here. Maybe just take what's right in front of you and get off to a good start in bowl season with this pick in the Bahamas Bowl. You ever been to the Bahamas, by the way, Tishu?
I have, yes. Couple of cruises.
Couple of cruises. Yeah, it's a nice place to stop. My daughter is going to the Bahamas right before Christmas for a trip to study ecological stuff. But instead of staying in a luxury hotel, she's staying in a cabin. So she's doing like an environmental thing. Now that's not what I would do, because if I'm going to go to the Bahamas, I'm not staying in a cabin. But she's young. She can handle it. She can sleep in a wooden bunk bed on the beach and learn about coral or whatever they're going to do. It's a wonderful opportunity. She's going with our local zoo. But let me see, she's leaving on Friday. Maybe they could swing by the Bahamas Bowl. That'd be a lovely thing for the little zoo trippers. Go study coral second, but maybe go to the Bahamas Bowl first. I'll suggest that to the zoo people, see if they can squeeze that in. I'm sure they would appreciate that. Hey guys, go to the Bahamas Bowl. It's an 11-point line. UAB is a huge favorite. Why don't you drop a couple nickels on that too while you're there? Make everybody happy. Go buy yourself a coral necklace or something. Okay, so we like the Bahamas Bowl. We're going to jump out early with the Bahamas Bowl pick there. The other one that I wanted to ask you about, it feels like there's a disparity here, and I just feel like this has been a really good team all year, and it's Boise State. And I'm seeing a pretty big gap in EPA between Boise State and North Texas. Boise State's 23rd. North Texas is 68th. It's a 10.5-point line. What do you think of that matchup, Tishu?
Yep, love it. That's the number 9 game on my board. Projected around 7 in favor of Boise State. The odds makers have it at about a 76% implied probability. So really like what Boise State put together down the stretch, kind of after they benched Hank Bachmeier, who's now in the transfer portal. They kind of got their offense figured out because their offense was abysmal early in the season. They kind of got that turned around and started scoring some points, and they finished the season really well. So I like Boise State here.
And sometimes, right, the line would lead you here, but there's just a couple other things I think that would lead you here as well. So I think that Boise State, it might be obvious, but this is confirmation that go ahead and sort of follow the line on that one. All right, Tishu, give us another one that you really like here.
So this is actually a playoff game. I'm going to take Michigan here over TCU. There's been a lot of sharp money on TCU here. I know we're not doing spread, but I projected it at 10.5, which I think this line opened around 10, and it's like 7.5, and I won't be surprised if it gets to 7. But I don't agree with the move. I think Michigan may roll here. I definitely like them to win here by double digits, and the implied probability here 72%. So I think Michigan is going to win the Fiesta Bowl here.
So when you think about this game, by your ratings, where is Michigan in your overall ratings, and where is TCU in your overall ratings? By this, they're the number 2 and number 3 teams in the country. Where do you have them?
So I've got Michigan number 3, and I've got TCU number 9. And then looking at the recent number, I've got Michigan 3 and TCU 7. So I mean, they're both in the top 10, kind of no matter how you slice it, but that's the key difference here between rating and ranking. Their ranking is very close. Their rating is not. And that's, I kind of define that as the nuance in between the rankings. And the nuance here is that Michigan's been a much better team all year long.
And you made your numbers. You told your numbers what to do, right? I mean, like, it's math, but you set up the math. And your numbers, you've been on this, your numbers have liked Michigan all year, right? I think you were stronger on Michigan. I think as some people were maybe still doubting Michigan or were not catching up to Michigan yet, we're wondering about J.J. McCarthy, various things, and your numbers really like them. Do you, without giving your formula away, how would you describe why it is that your numbers liked Michigan so much all year? And again, and we're right. They're one of the two teams that got through undefeated.
Yeah, my numbers have been very high on Michigan, much higher than odds makers here for quite a while here this season. And it's paid off because Michigan's continued to cover spreads. As for the reason, I think it probably has to do with how much odds makers downgraded Michigan after what they lost last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then the fact that I eliminate prior data much earlier in the season than odds makers do. So they downgraded them a lot after last season, and then they held on to that downgraded number for longer than they should have, whereas my numbers adjusted more quickly.
So that makes sense. Your numbers lived a little bit more in the here and now, and maybe a lot of people were saying, I don't know, man, Aiden Hutchinson, he was pretty good. And it turns out that, as Jim Harbaugh said in the offseason, they had a defense that didn't have as many stars, but he thought could still play at a very high level. We saw what their run game, their offensive line is. When you can do what you do, Blake Corum, again, I think if Blake Corum was healthy for the Ohio State game and healthy for the Big Ten championship game, I think he would have won the Heisman. And that is an unfortunate reality for him. And I don't know that this is fair. It's probably unfair. It's probably on the surface unfair. But Donovan Edwards played so well and was so productive in Blake Corum's absence, I think it almost hurt Blake Corum's Heisman case of well, you're really good, but man, it's this offensive line, it's this scheme, it's the way Michigan goes about its business that not that anybody could step into that running back spot and succeed, because Donovan Edwards, by the way, is a supremely talented individual who was a borderline 5-star recruit. But if he just would have gone out and done that, if he had been breaking off 80-yard runs to put away the Ohio State game instead of his backup doing that, and then he would have gone indoors on a fast track against Purdue and tried to do that, I think he would have been there, man. I think he would have been there. He's a great player. He's a great running back, and they're going to try to win a national championship without him. But there's also something about this Michigan team that was real and was not about just one player. And I think your numbers just had a view on that. I do. It's the numbers that you have revealed over the season, Tishu, especially when you start leaning on the more recent games, right? And you just start dropping out some of the early stuff. I think it really gives you a picture of the true, really good teams, which was where it led you to Florida State and it's led you to Michigan the whole way through.
Yeah, I've got Michigan as the number 3 offense in the country and the number 2 defense in the country. They're just a very balanced team. And like I said, my numbers just have not been nearly as high on TCU. I know they went undefeated. There were quite a few just games in there that, yes, they won, but the numbers just were not that impressive. I've got TCU as the 17th ranked offense and the 41st ranked defense. So just not in the same ballpark as where Michigan's at as a team.
Okay, so that's a very interesting pick. The idea of, wow, what do you have the most confidence in? One of the semifinals that's supposed to be between the number 2 and number 3 teams in the country. I am very sure about that as opposed to some other. But I do think, the numbers tell you what the numbers are going to tell you. Can I ask you about a game that I have to? I can't help myself. I have to ask.
Let's do it.
I have to ask about it. So listen, I think people know, right? I'm not trying. It's in the past. It's fine. It was what it was. But I will say this week, I guess I saw it. I didn't hear it, but I saw it in a graphic on Twitter that Cade McNamara, who will be Iowa's quarterback next season, had a quote about, please keep downgrading our offense. Please keep doing it. I love it. Tell us how terrible we're going to be. And someone pointed that out and sent it to me on Twitter and said it sounds like he's talking to Doug Lesmerises with this quote, because as people may have known, I asked Kirk Ferentz some very pointed questions about his son and offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz earlier this year. And then Iowa went on a little winning streak, not while being a productive offense, but they just managed to win despite its offense before blowing a chance at the Big Ten championship game by losing to Nebraska. And so I said, well, maybe Cade McNamara is talking to me, or maybe he's just he's just talking at the stats because they were whatever they were, 120th in points per game. In EPA, everything offensively, they're 126th, they're 123rd, they're 127th. Like by every numerical measure of offense, Iowa had a bat. Can I ask you real quick? What was your rating, your ranking and rating of Iowa's offense this year? I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just curious. I'm just curious.
Well, you're going to have to give me a second. I have to scroll way down here to find them. It's easier if I just start from the bottom and work my way up to find Iowa. They are 90th in offense for me.
Oh, they'll take it. Oh, well, now I feel bad. They're 90th. That's like 40 teams worse than them. I apologize, Iowa. I was wrong. You're 90th. So here's my question. Spencer Petras is hurt. He was their quarterback originally. Alex Padilla is transferring. He was the quarterback who came in because Cade McNamara, who led Michigan to the playoff last year and then lost his job to J.J. McCarthy, he is transferring to Iowa. So they don't have a quarterback. And they're playing Kentucky, where Will Levis, the Kentucky quarterback, has opted out. And Chris Rodriguez, the leading rusher for Kentucky, has opted out. I don't think anybody's going to pick this game with any confidence. By EPA, Kentucky is 53rd and Iowa is 88th. That's a pretty big gap. But I think maybe Kentucky, without its quarterback and without its leading rusher, I could see Iowa winning this game 3-0. And I don't even think I'm joking. Iowa legitimately has a very, very good defense. And I just don't know how anybody on either side is going to score points in this game. I just had to ask you what your view of Iowa-Kentucky is.
Yeah, I saw that Cade McNamara graphic, and I almost sent it to you as well. I project this Iowa -2, and again, that's not even accounting for the opt-outs here with Levis and Rodriguez. So I would put even more confidence behind Iowa there. But even so, they're still really low on my board. I mean, this is not one that I'm like running to go pick or bet or anything like that. I'm with you. I think. I projected it as a 2-point game. I think, could this be like 8-6 or 9-7 or something? Like that is within the realm of possibility, I think.
Okay. What's another one then that you really like, Tishu? I think we're about 9 or 10 games in right now.
Yep. I like Memphis against Utah State.
I knew it. I should ask you about that because Memphis has been a team, again, that you have been on this year to some degree, right?
Yep. I project them as a 10-point favorite here. And they've got a 71% implied probability. That's a team, again, they're kind of under the radar, but they've been solid. And then down the stretch here, I mean, looking at the recent numbers, I still would project it at 9. So they just, to me, their body of work and their recent play both have been better than anything Utah State's done this year.
December 27th, the ServPro First Responder Bowl. Again, that line I'm looking at is 7.5. So the EPA difference here, this is another one with a big EPA gap because Memphis is, again, is a team 46th in EPA for Memphis, 104th for Utah State. So that's a pretty big gap. So I should have asked about that because I figured that you would be on Memphis there. Let me ask you about a game where there's a discrepancy here. And again, I'm always intrigued by when you get inside the numbers a little bit and the numbers are going against what the spread is telling you. Going by EPA again, it's this expected points added. It's just a measure of, kind of takes everything into account. The Air Force Baylor bowl game, Baylor is favored by 5.5, but in EPA, and again, I don't know exactly why, Air Force is 12th and Baylor is 51st. So this would be a little odd to me to have supreme confidence in what by the spread is a 5.5-point underdog. But I'm curious how you view this Baylor Air Force matchup.
Yeah, this is not one, because we're just talking straight up winners here. This is not one that is high on my board at all. In fact, it's the third lowest. And I know we're not doing best bets here, but I can just tell our audience that I 100% am going to be betting Air Force in this game plus the points. For a lot of what you just said, I project them I mean, 2 of my 3 formulas have them winning outright, and the other one literally is like right at 0. So it's a toss up. But the recent number, I would make Air Force a 5-point favorite, and then the average of those, Air Force -2.5. So I think Air Force can and probably will win this game, but not a super high confidence in that. But do I think they can keep it within a touchdown? Yes.
Okay. So again, if you're getting about 5.5 or 6, this could be a money line opportunity to go ahead and bet Air Force straight up. But again, it's a little hard, in a confidence pool to go super hard on an underdog by that many points, which is why it's not as high on your board. But again, if you want to bet, maybe have that Air Force. It's the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl on December 22nd. Maybe just keep that Baylor Air Force matchup in the back of your minds a little bit. All right, T-Shoe, you got one more for us at least?
I'm going to go with LSU against Purdue. I don't love them laying the points, but in terms of straight up, I don't know what the path to victory for Purdue is here. I make it LSU -7.5. Their implied win probability is 77 by the odds makers. I know the quarterback Daniels for LSU, was kind of banged up in the SEC championship. Not sure what his status is, so obviously that would affect things. But I haven't seen anything that says he's not playing. So correct me if I'm wrong there, but I have not seen that he's not playing. So I'm going to go with LSU here against Purdue.
So this is the 6th game. When I just ran through it, we've done the other 5. This is the 6th game where the spread is double digits. And the thing that I am curious about that makes me a little nervous about this is that I think Purdue seems excited about the hire of new head coach Ryan Walters that happened on Tuesday, replacing Jeff Brom. And from everything I've read or seen so far, it feels like Aiden O'Connell, the really good Purdue quarterback, is going to play in this game. And certainly they will miss Jeff Brom, and I think Jeff Brom served Purdue well, got them to the Big Ten championship game this year. Really nice year for Purdue. But Ryan Walters, I don't know that it was off the board entirely, but that is a really intriguing hire. That is a young, up-and-coming defensive coordinator who had been a very big part of Illinois' success since Brett Bielema got there. And for Purdue to go ahead and pull the trigger on that. It's one of those guys, these young defensive guys. I think he's 36 years old. And I think this to me was the case with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Back in the day, it was the case with Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. I think it was in some ways the case with Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. Sometimes these youngish defensive guys who have some of that youthful energy, but also that hard-nosed defensive attitude, man, they can rally the troops. Now, listen, Marcus Freeman took over for Brian Kelly in bowl season last year for Notre Dame, and they had a big lead and then they blew it. So, I mean, okay, it doesn't mean you're going to win your bowl game. But by the numbers, I'm trying to think about motivation in this game. LSU is in a situation where going into the last week of the regular season, it's like, listen, LSU has a chance to make the playoff because all they have to do is go beat Georgia in the SEC title game, which is like, well, what do you mean all you have to do? It's like, well, at least you have a shot. And then they lost to Texas A&M. And the last game of the regular season is like, well, nope, there goes that. Now they're just going to go play for pride against Georgia. And then they get a punt, like they're kind of hanging around a little bit. And then they get special teams play and give up a touchdown because they're not kind of paying attention. So I'm trying to think who's going to be more excited to be in this game. Purdue with its new, youthful, energized, up-and-coming head coach, or LSU, which is like, we're playing Purdue. We just went through the SEC. Brian Kelly came here and danced around like we had a weird start. Then everybody got hepped up. They beat some good team. They beat Alabama, right? They beat Alabama. What's your reward for beating Alabama? Go play Purdue. I don't know if the people in Baton Rouge are all fired up for that. And Purdue, I do think, is better than maybe the average LSU Tiger would realize. I don't know, Tishu, if you would have a handle on this. Do you know how much they follow Big Ten West football in Baton Rouge?
I would imagine 0.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't think people will walk around being like, I'll tell you what, PJ Fleck and Jeff Brom and Brett Bielema, boy, those boys in the Big Ten West get after. It's like, no, they ignore them. And then they're telling the LSU guys, like, hey guys, it's Purdue. So I like the numbers on this make sense to me. I don't like the vibe on this because I will just tell you, And maybe I think my mind would have been different yesterday, but it felt like Purdue got very excited. Like it's just a smart hire. It's an invigorating hire. You lose Jeff Brom. Oh no, Jeff Brom went home. And this is and I think it's sizzle and substance, right? This isn't a guy coming in, doing dance moves. He's just like a really smart young coordinator getting a shot, not early, but maybe a little bit ahead of what people expected. It just makes me nervous. I'm not saying it's a bad pick by a UT shoe, but I'm saying as I would go down to pick my confidence pool, the vibes around this would make me a little nervous. Am I a crazy person?
No, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with anything you just said. I just think, like, at the end of the day, to be honest, if Coach O was still coaching LSU, I would ignore the numbers and go with what you just said. But Brian Kelly has been the type of coach that wins the games for the most part that he's supposed to win. He hasn't. I mean, I get that they lost to Texas A&M, but there's still a lot of talent on Texas A&M. Brian Kelly just historically has won the games that he's supposed to win. Now, he never beat any of the great teams that he played, but they beat teams that they're supposed to. So I don't think LSU is going to come in entirely flat. Although this would be, I mean, from a betting perspective, you're getting double digits with Purdue. This might be a betting opportunity on Purdue plus the points, but in terms of Purdue winning, I would just be surprised, even though everything you just said is valid, and they definitely are going to have more juice coming into this game. They're going to be way more excited to play LSU than LSU is to play them. But I mean, you still got to go out there and do it, and there's still a whole lot more 4 and 5 stars on the other side than there are in Purdue.
All right, let me ask you. I want to ask you about two specific teams, and there's one more matchup that intrigues me, and I want to get your read on. But the two teams that you have over the course of this season been very interested in, and I think had success with it at various times in various ways. One is Duke. And Duke is a team I think you won multiple times this year. They're in the Military Bowl against Central Florida. Duke is -1.5 on December 28th. EPA, this is a pretty good matchup. I think they're both like roughly in the 30s or so. I think you got on Duke early. Duke is 31 in EPA, UCF is 43. I was just wondering if you thought this was another good spot for Duke, but I think maybe also Central Florida is a team that you like the times this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the line goes, I think the line is probably on. My numbers would have it like -2.5 for UCF as a favorite. But then you got to factor in John Rice Plumlee has been banged up, and the guy that's been playing for him, Mikey Keene, is in the transfer portal. So I don't know what the UCF quarterback situation is going to be. My recent formula would have Duke -2, so I think that's probably more the true line. So I don't have a strong play here either way, both in terms of straight up winner or in terms of a betting pick, just because the numbers are kind of conflicted, and then the quarterback situation for UCF is a little murky. I will say, in terms of the motivation and excitement to be in this game, I think Duke probably is going to come in a lot more juiced up than UCF. So everything else being equal, I think I would probably lean Duke both straight up and against the spread here.
All right, and I got to ask you about Rice. Rice became a fan favorite earlier in this season, as you and I were talking about betting. Rice is in the Lending Tree Bowl on Saturday. Rice is a 6.5-point underdog to Southern Miss. I felt like you were on Rice early and then got off Rice at the end. It's all about matchups. It's not about what makes you feel good inside. It's about what the numbers are telling you. I had to ask about Rice, though. Where are you with this Rice game?
Well, for starters, let me just tease this and say that I'm still waiting on your Christmas present to come in, and I'm going to be sending that immediately, and you're going to absolutely love it. So,
so excited.
So, as for this game, though, I actually would pretty strongly lean Southern Miss. This is the 11th ranked game on my board. Rice, we were on them early against the spread. The market kind of caught up, and then their performance kind of dipped pretty substantially. So, I mean, I project this game Southern Miss -6. My numbers, all three formulas are pretty much in like a 5 to 8 point range here for Southern Miss. Implied probability 68%. So I think Southern Miss is going to win here. I don't know how much Rice has left in the tank. They've been kind of bad here down the stretch of the season.
Okay, sorry, Rice. We still love you.
We do still love you.
Just a little bit kind of a weird situation on both, and it's a game where neither of the team's main starting quarterback from this season is going to be playing in this game because both are in the portal. And it's Wisconsin versus Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders is out for Oklahoma State. Graham Mertz is out for Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is the new head coach at Wisconsin. There's a lot of moving parts here. The EPA, again, Wisconsin was just a weird team. Like, I thought they were going to be really good this year. They weren't. They fired their coach. They had some competitive games then with Jim Leonard where they looked okay, and then they still lost some games maybe they shouldn't have lost. Their EPA is 40th. Oklahoma State's is 96 for an Oklahoma State team that, like, in the middle of the year was like, are they going to win the Big 12? And it was like, nope, they are not going to win the Big 12. I'm intrigued by the gap in EPA between those two teams. Wisconsin is a 3-point favorite in this game. And again, I'm such a betting guy now. It's like, I don't even know what the name. Back in the day, it's like, oh, bowl games. I love bowl games. Now it's just matchups. I don't care. The Guaranteed Rate Bowl on December 27th. I just wanted to get your read on Wisconsin, Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I mean, I think both quarterbacks being in the portal comes out more net positive for Wisconsin just because of the style that these two teams want to play. And Oklahoma State without Spencer Sanders in the lineup this year has not been very good. Whereas I think Wisconsin can stand to take that blow of Graham Mertz being out because, I mean, his performance has not been anything special, we'll say. They're obviously going to lean more on the run game, play good defense. I would pretty strongly lean both straight up and against the spread here with Wisconsin in this matchup.
Okay. Are there any other games, Tishu, that we did not talk about that you want to discuss because it's interesting, because you have a real good vibe on it? Anything that maybe the public consensus would be one way that you would advise people against? I just want to make sure we don't leave anything hanging out there that you wanted to talk about.
Two games that I'm just intrigued to watch just as a fan. I'm probably not going to have any type of action on them, but the Clemson Tennessee matchup and Kansas State Alabama, I'm very curious to see those two games and see who plays in those games and just kind of how those games, like you said earlier, springboard a team or, you know, put a dark cloud over a team heading into the offseason. So those are the two games I'm probably most interested in, outside of the playoff, but I don't really have a strong feel either way until we know who all's playing in those games.
Yeah, I mean, again, Kansas State is a team that you have liked much of the year. That line at the moment with Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, I think, is only 3.5, which you sort of look at and you're like, what? I don't think we know for sure who's going to play for Alabama in that game. Alabama has two guys who are in there who are getting ready for the NFL draft, who both might be picked in the top 5. So if Bryce Young and or Will Anderson decide not to play in this game, which would be a very reasonable choice, but is not anything that we know for sure at this point, this is a moment for Kansas State, right? And we've seen this at times, right? There was Utah beat Alabama, I think, in a Sugar Bowl one time. That was sort of like a motivational matchup. Did Cincinnati beat Alabama in a bowl game that was like a motivational thing of like, it's just when you're Bama, you're expecting to play for a national title. And if you're not, it doesn't mean you're not going to try, but it's just a different animal. And Kansas State, man, they would hang that skin in the beat Bama. I don't know. Like, I guess teams put up bowl things and little logos. It would just be a sign. Beat Bama. So I think we don't know who the people are, but motivationally, again, at first blush, you think 3.5. It's only Bama minus 3.5. But man, motivationally, K-State may come out like on fire for this game, Tishu, which is why you're interested to watch it.
Yep. And just one kind of number nugget on this. My recent formula makes this line only Alabama -2, and that's factoring in, Alabama at full strength. So just keep that in mind, as we continue to get news on opt-outs and that sort of thing. If you are looking, you're going to be watching it. If you are looking to make a bet, maybe keep that in mind.
That's interesting because you could then, you're saying you could almost reasonably make a football bet on Kansas State with the points right now. And then if some of Bama's best players don't play, now you've gotten the number now, which is based at least a little bit on the idea that they still might play. Now, maybe the bookmakers are already taking that into account, but there's a football reason. That would be, I think a lot of people would be surprised, like, what? Like just football, even strength. You're saying it's a 2-point game based off your recent numbers. Those are interesting numbers.
Yep.
That's our bowl pool helper. We're helpers. Like Mr. Rogers always says, look for the helpers. We're trying to help you win your bowl confidence pool. We appreciate you guys listening. T-Shoe is awesome at what he does. And just one more time, Tyler, give the good people where they can follow you for all kinds of betting advice about college football, which you put out on Twitter constantly.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at BuckeyeTie23 for especially during bowl season. Any nuggets, any bets that I'm making, which will be much closer to game time. So following me, turn on my tweet notifications. When we're on game day, so you can get all of my bets on there and all the information that I'm putting out.
As always, we appreciate it, T-Shoe. We will be back to wrap everything up right after this.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.
And that will do it for this episode of the College Football Survivor Show. You can follow us on Twitter, CFB Survivor Show. You can get subscribed so you make sure you don't miss any College Football Survivor episodes. Next week, we'll be back. We're going to break down both semifinals. We're going to dive in with experts, talk about both those games. And then the week after, when I actually will be on site at the Peach Bowl with Ohio State and Georgia, Shehan and I will be back then. We'll be giving our picks for the games, breaking all that down. And I think we're going to do a draft of the best players in the playoff. So a lot ahead. We appreciate you guys joining us all season. Again, if you want to join us on ESPN.com, their bowl challenge, it's the College Football Survivor Show with Doug and Shehan. The password is playoff. We hope to see you there. For now, for Tyler Shoemaker, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the College Football Survivor Show.
The College Football Survivor Show, where playoff survival is always on the line.